All right, everyone. Um, First of all, everyone, thank you so much for coming out to our event on this Wednesday. So first, gonna clap for all of you. So my name is Brian Young Jr. Um, my name is Brian Young Jr. I am a organizer here at Community Renewal Society. And Community Renewal Society, we are an organization that um, informs and brings people together of faith in our congregations in partnership with communities, coalition, interfaith networks, and civil leaders to intentionally and transform and decisively transform society towards the greater good on the issues of racial justice and poverty alleviation. Now, we have five sort of like pillars, fellow Phyllis. We have sort of five pillars that we try to go over, which are restoring opportunities and justice reform, just economy, community development and reparations, LGBTQIA plus faith, race and equity, and healing justice and reconciliation. And so this is what we do here at CRS, and as members of the steering committee and the Free2Move Coalition, we are here today. My name is Brian Young Jr., and I'm here today with Jay Ramiro, interim pastor at Urban Village Church. You can come off chat and introduce yourself, Jay.
I'm student pastor, not interim pastor.
Sorry.
It's good to be with everybody. Nice to meet y'all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so everyone, before we get to this event is called Stop Stopping Us. Stop Stopping Us is an event, and the purpose of this event is first to highlight our campaign and the work that we do around End Pretextual Stops. So essentially, we've been involved in the End Pretextual Stops campaign, which has, pretty much sort of hit its height and really, really, really got going since the killing of a young man named Dexter Reed. I know you heard about this. This was 96 shots, just a really inhumane killing. But it all started with a kind of pretextual stop. There was suspicion of him having something in his car, a tenant car. Don't know how they even would have that suspicion in the first place, right? And so what happened with this is that being that we are an organization that is around police accountability and have been a part of the Free2Move Coalition, this is something where we were able to go into and start to organizing. So over the course of the summer, we, along with the Free2Move Coalition, we tabled and canvassed in Chicago and in most impacted communities over 12 times this summer, and we ended up um, you know uh, sort of having, oops, sorry about that. We ended up having enough people to sign up in the communities that wanted to end this, that we were able to bring it to the CCPSA with over 2,400 signatures to have a special meeting to hear about pretextual stops. And so right now, the campaign right now, it looks like right now it's in the consent decree, and we are sort of battling to have this thing met. And so yes, we're highlighting the killing of Dexter Reed, but we're moving forward in this presentation to give you a sort of presentation on pretextual stops and what we think should be done about it. Towards the end of this meeting, we're also going to go over just like ways that you can get involved, and last but not least, we're gonna have a call to action to people. Does that sound good, everyone? If that sounds good, can you give me a thumbs up in the chat? All right. Okay. Okay, everyone. So that's pretty good. So thank you. Thank you so much, Jackson and Andy. So I'm gonna go ahead and start here with the presentation. Belaya, if you could pull up the first slide. All right. So the problem with traffic stops. Um, so good evening, everyone. I'm here today on behalf of the Free2Move Coalition to discuss our recent report analyzing CPD's 2023 traffic data stops and our efforts to change this practice. Free2Move is a coalition of community members and advocacy organizations working to create a safer, more racially equitable system of traffic safety in Chicago. We came together initially in 2021 to discuss the alarming issues we saw with Chicago's current traffic safety system. While the concept of driving while Black are being stopped for a minor traffic violation as a pretext, as a pretext to investigate mostly Black and brown drivers was nothing new. The initial data we observed showed a troubling increase in recent years. Go to the next slide. Okay. So what we want to do is provide a little bit of an overview right now. I briefly want to explain the scope of the types of stops we're talking about today. All the data we're talking about is data from vehicle stops made by a Chicago Police Department officer for an alleged violation of the traffic code. The reason for a stop can include movement violations, like improper turn, failure to completely stop at a stop sign, equipment violations like broken headlight or tail light, cracked windshield, licensing and registration violations, like expired registration tags. Any of these stops could be a pretext for traffic stops, pretextual traffic stops. This pretextual traffic stops is when an officer uses a violation of a traffic code, typically a minor violation, like an expired registration, as an excuse to pull someone over, when their real motivation to investigate the person for signs of criminal activity that do not have reasonable suspicion of is, this is important because if an officer does have a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity, in many cases, they can pull over a car without stopping them for traffic violations. So we want to make this very clear. We're not talking here about stops where the officer has legally sufficient suspicion that the person committed robbery or carjacking. We are talking about pretextual stops. So this is a very separate sort of like thing. So while pretextual stops are legal, they weren't always. And this open loophole leads to abuse of power by police and other harmful outcomes. All right. And so now we're going to move to the traffic data. I'll pass it over to Jay. Go ahead to the next slide.
So this next few slides, we're going to talk about the data analysis shown from city traffic stops in Chicago. So we reviewed over data from 4.6 million traffic stops conducted by the CPD for 19 years, with a particular focus on stops from 2015 to 2022, when the traffic stops skyrocketed. And so here's a little bit of our initial findings. The data is publicly available from sources from the Freedom of Information Act responses from the CPD, Illinois Department of Transportation, the Illinois Secretary of the State, and the City of Chicago Office of Inspector General. So our first key finding is that CPD traffic stops have risen dramatically in recent years. And in the next slide, we'll see a little bit of a graph of that. Second, CPD isn't making traffic stops to make traffic safer. What we're finding is that police are making large number of stops for minor traffic offenses to fish for evidence and criminal activity. So naturally, this leads to that the stops are an ineffective tool in the purported goal of crime investigation. And then most importantly, the stops are harmful, they're racially disparate, and the CPD traffic stops disproportionately impact Black and Latino drivers and communities on Chicago's South and West Side. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here is the graph of a number of traffic stops all the way from 2004. So from 2004 to 2015, the stops decreased from around 240,000 in 2004 to a low of 86,000 stops in 2015. But then after 2015, the numbers just shot up. It increased actually by 700% in the last 4 years. And then although those numbers dropped a little bit in 2020, probably due to COVID, the stops have rebounded and continue to rise. And in 2023, CPD made over 537,000 stops. On the next slide, so what are people getting pulled over for? Why are these stops being made? The data shows that the types of violations that the CPD is pulling people over for are increasingly shifting towards stops for minor offenses. So rather than stops that could present actual serious traffic dangers. In 2004, over 75% of the stops made by the CPD were for those moving offenses, which is the category of offenses most likely and most dangerous for driving behavior. But when the stops began increasing in 2015, CPD began to focus more on making stops for non-moving violations. So that's your equipment, your licensing and registration violations. In 2015, the equipment stops are ballooning. And as of 2022, licensing and registration violations took the lead for the largest category. In 2023, they were the reason for almost 45% of all CPD traffic stops.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jay. And so now we're going to move to the specific offenses. The next slide, if you could take a look at the graphic here. So when looking at specific offenses people are stopped for, in 2023, nearly 70% of traffic stops were made for having an unlit or broken headlight, and even or a tail light, or a failure to have valid or properly displayed registration plates or tags. CPD made stops for more dangerous offenses like speeding much more rarely. Speeding comprised only 0.68% of the stops. And so now we're going to move to the citations on slide 9. So the citations, the finding that CPD is making stops for minor reasons that do not present significant safety risks is underscored by how infrequently officers cite the drivers that are stopped. In 2023, only 3.7% of traffic stops resulted in citations. That's far below the rates of some other cities with large police departments. Last year, New York City cited drivers in 85% of stops, and Houston cited drivers in 40% of stops. So then, why have stops increased? So the increased numbers seem to be a shift in CPD investigation strategy. In 2015, CPD entered into a settlement agreement with the ACLU in response to the ACLU's finding that the CPD disproportionately stopped and frisked Black people, often without reasonable suspicion. This resulted in a significant reduction in CPD's stop and frisk practices over the next few years. At the same time, though, CPD's traffic stop numbers shot way up. So if you look at the graph, it appears as if instead of stopping people when an officer has reasonable suspicion of a criminal activity, CPD now has pivoted to using pretextual traffic stops. So these stops allowed them to pull over drivers for minor reasons, whether it's a taillight or whatever, to fish for other signs of criminal activity, even when they have no suspicion in the first place. And then, you know, in relationship to arrests, the data shows here with our arrests that the strategy of using stops for minor traffic violations as a pretext to stop a person and fish for evidence of criminal activity, it does not work. As stops have increased, the percentage of traffic stops resulting in an arrest has decreased. In 2023, only 2.2% of traffic stops resulted in an arrest. That low number has stayed consistent over the last 3 years, when traffic stops increased 40% from 2021 to 2023. And I'm gonna pass it. Oh, wait, no, it's 2023. I'm gonna pass it over to Jay.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so some of the things that the CPD is hoping to find these traffic stops are contraband. So what we are finding, though, is that they're rarely recovering contraband like drugs, alcohol, or weapons. In 2023, less than 1% of traffic stops resulted in recovery of illegal items like drugs, alcohols, or weapons. Only about 0.3% of stops were reported to inventory drugs or drug paraphernalia. If we look at firearm data, we also see that only a small fraction of traffic stops are leading to police recovering firearms. CPD records show that in 2023, across more than 537,000 stops, only 0.5% of these stops resulted in recovering a firearm. The relatively infrequent contraband recovery and arrest generated by such massive numbers raise serious doubts of the efficacy of this tactic. So let's take a look at another issue we're having with these traffic stops: racial disparities. So in the orange, you're going to see the percentage of traffic stops in 2023, and in the green, this is that race's population within Chicago. So beyond being ineffective, CPD traffic stops raise serious concerns because they disproportionately harm Black and Latino drivers and communities. Citywide from 2015 to 2021, the average Black driver was 6 times more likely to be stopped than the average white driver. If we're looking at individual police districts, in some police districts where it was a majority white area, Black drivers were up to 10 times as likely to be stopped compared to white drivers when accounting for their percentage of the population. Citywide, Latino drivers during this period were stopped 2 times the rate of white drivers. And looking at the individual police district, Latino drivers were likely to be stopped more than white drivers in 73% of districts from 2015 to 2021. So these disparities have persisted into last year in 2023. Citywide, Black drivers were over 51% of those stopped, and they make up 29% of Chicago's population. Latino drivers make up a significant percentage of those stopped, comprising of 30.7%. And then we have white drivers who were actually understopped compared to their population makeup. White drivers were only stopped a mere 13.6%, despite being over 32% of Chicago's population. Let's look at how it breaks down in the individual districts. So here's a map of all the districts, and where you see darker green or darker color, that's where the concentration of stops are most. So you can see how Black and Latino drivers are impacted differently. And CPD's numbers have increased with a focus on Black and Latino communities in the South and increasingly West Sides. This trend continued into last year, and in 2023, CPD increased its focus on stops, specifically in District 11, which is home to Chicago's West and East Garfield Park, Humboldt Park communities. That was a location of over 10% of the city's traffic stops. District 11, which is home to just 2.5% of the city's population, is over 96% Black and Latino. District 10 and District 11's neighbor immediately to the south, District 7, the Englewood area, had the next highest number of traffic stops. These districts are also over 90%, 6% Black and Latino.
And so now we want to move to the racial disparities in these searches. So here is the graph right here. We also see that racial disparities when looking at consent searches. Consent search occurs when an officer receives consent from a stopped person to search their person and/or the vehicle. Officers do not need to have any level of, excuse me, sorry about that, any level of suspicion of criminal activity before requesting a driver's consent to search. But these searches are inherently problematic. Not only do they allow police to embark on suspicionless fishing expeditions of a person and their belongings, but the inherently coercive nature of police encounter means any consent given may not truly be voluntary. From 2015 to 2021, over 95% of consent search requests were made to Black or Latino drivers. It's disproportionate. 73% of consent search requests were made to Black drivers, and 22% of consent search requests were made of Latine drivers. So this is just, but with this, only 4% of consent search requests were made to white drivers. And so now we go to the racial disparities in the arrests. If you look at the graph here, we also see disparities when looking at who was arrested. In 2023, 65% of people arrested from traffic stops were Black people. So that's an overrepresentation, even when considering that Black drivers are 51% of those stopped. Latine people were 29% of those arrested. White people were just 5% of people arrested from traffic stops. An underrepresentation when considering they were over 13% of stop drivers. And then we move to racial disparities in use of force. So more severe harms can also come from a traffic stop. Traffic stops too often escalate into violence, right? And there too, Black and Latine people end up experiencing the brunt of this violence, the brunt of this impact. In 2023, CPD conducted 211 uses of force, during a traffic stop. 90% of traffic stop uses of force were against people of color. And so now we want to shift you to look at the Superintendent Snelling and how Superintendent Snelling was able to Superintendent Snelling fared in this aspect.
Yeah, so if you guys can remember, Superintendent Snelling is the superintendent that was recently confirmed by the Chicago City Council last year. In our recent 2023 report, we wanted to focus on his first 3 months on the job. So that's the fourth quarter of 2023. Superintendent Snelling said that he is someone who would think differently about traffic stops. He said he wanted to focus his strategy on responding to violent crime and dangerous driving. And so we want to see if he actually did that in his first 3 months and see if the data reflected what he was saying was a change in perspective. Overall, however, we're seeing that the numbers had a little bit of adjustment, but generally had the same practice of making excessive traffic stops and violations that target Black and Latine drivers and communities. So let's look at the numbers. Starting in that top left, the data show that under Superintendent Snelling, traffic stops did decline slightly in the 3-month period. CPT made over 118,000 traffic stops. That's about a 4% decline from the prior quarter. However, that is still far too high. 118,000 stops is more than the CPD made in the entire year in 2015. If you can remember to our graph, that was 86,000 stops in comparison. The data showed that under Superintendent Snelling, CPD had an even greater focus on licensing and registration violations during 2023 overall. In quarter 4 of 2023, 48.7% of the stops were for licensing and registration violations. On the other hand, the moving offenses comprised the smallest category of all stops. It was less than a quarter of all stops, and speeding was just 0.43%. These numbers do not give any indication that in quarter 4, the department was focusing on stops for dangerous driving. We also saw racial disparities persist under this first quarter. 81% of stop drivers were Black or Latine, and furthermore, there was an even greater concentration on the West Side districts of 11 and 10. In 2023 overall, these districts were the location of about 19% of the stops, and in quarter 4 of 2023, the number actually increased to 22%. And then finally, in 2023, the citation, arrest, and contraband recovery rates for traffic stops under Superintendent Snelling remain low. In quarter 4, only 4.2% of traffic stops resulted in citation, 2.5% resulted in arrest, and 0.8% in contraband recovery. About 0.5% resulted in gun recovery. So what we're seeing is that his first 3 months showed more of the same traffic stop strategy. And even though it's his first 3 months on the job, there's still a long way for him to go to meet his commitments. This graph is showing District 6, which is the Auburn, Gresham neighborhoods and the Chatham neighborhoods. And again, there are racial disparities that we're seeing in these neighborhoods. In 2015 and 2021, Black drivers were almost doubly likely to be stopped than white drivers. And then for Latine drivers around that same time period, they were 1.7 times more likely to be stopped. We're going to move on to see how we're going to change this with the policy platform. Oh, you're on mute.
You're on.
Sorry about that, y'all. So yes, as you all know, we are here to talk about policy. And with the Free2Move campaign, we actually we proposed a 3-point policy platform. So the data described here shows compelling evidence that CPD has sustainably increased its use of minor traffic stops as a policy strategy intended to fish for criminal activity. But the stops are unsuccessful in achieving those goals. And Black and Latine drivers and communities are disproportionately experiencing the harmful weight of this ineffective policing strategy. To address the problems, however, we see in this data and the experiences you've heard from people most impacted by these stops, the Free2Move Coalition set out over the last year to develop a strategy for transformational change in how Chicago enforces traffic safety. So the first step in this process, though, was collecting data from around the country. The first step was to learn more about the many reforms to traffic enforcement being implemented around the nation. The jurisdictions identified on this map have taken steps to address pretextual stops by passing legislation, setting court precedent, and changing department policy. Now, right now, these changes have been more recent, but there is data to show that these reforms decreased stops, reduced disparities, and in some cases led to more targeted and effective policing. However, evidence also demonstrated that without comprehensive reform, the long-held practice of pretextual stops will persist. That led us to champion a 3-pronged policy solution that we are hoping the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. This is the commission that was created from the Empowering Communities for Public Safety and Accountability Act that was passed through the ECPS ordinance in 2021. We'll act on to create a new binding CPD department policy. All right, so we're going to the first one. So the first step is to limit low-level stops. Stops for minor violations have little to no impact on roadway safety, but nonetheless are some of the most common justifications for traffic enforcement. This would include infractions like having one broken headlight or taillight, failure to have a license plate, light, or recently expired registration. A number of jurisdictions have taken up a version of this change, including Virginia, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Oregon, and the San Francisco Police Department. Early data from Philadelphia showed that after the reform, police seemed to be more purposeful with their investigation. Both the actual number of weapons and the rate of weapon recovery from traffic stops increased. So now we move to the second way. So the second thing is, let's just eliminate pretextual stops altogether. So reducing stops for low-level offenses may reduce pretextual traffic stops. However, this change leaves room for officers to pivot using different traffic offenses like failures to make a full stop at a stop sign or failure to use a turn signal as a justification to continue with the same behaviors. Therefore, eliminate pretextual stops is the best way to go. This is our second prong of our proposed policy, and this would restrict officers from making pretextual stops outright. Closing this legal loophole would prevent police from stopping people for minor traffic violations with the intention of fishing for signs of criminal activity without having suspicion in the first place. Last year, the Los Angeles Police Department, the LAPD, implemented a version of this policy. Preliminary data on outcomes showed a reduction in stops for minor offenses and decreased minor stops of Black drivers. And so now we move to the third one, which is to end suspicionless consent searches during traffic stops. So we are advocating to end suspicionless consent searches during traffic stops for traffic code violations. What this is the incentive to perform pretextual stops is the hope that an officer potentially might find evidence of criminal violations during a traffic stop. But even if they don't, they still can legally ask a person for consent to search, even if they have no suspicion in the first place. As we noted earlier, the inherently coercive nature of police interaction means any consent given may not truly be voluntary. This policy would prevent phishing by requiring law enforcement to have an independent legal basis to conduct a search a person, their vehicle, or their belongings during a traffic code violation stop. And we've seen this, work in places like Connecticut, Rhode Island, and the San Francisco Police Department have successfully passed a version of this already. And so now we're going to move to the projected outcomes.
All right, so what do we hope to achieve from this policy platform? So the primary opposition of the three-part plan has been that it's going to make it more difficult for officers to do their jobs and make our streets more dangerous. We believe, however, the evidence shows that the reforms will actually have the opposite result. So what do we want to hope to achieve? So first, we would expect to see a reduction in the use of pretextual traffic stops, leading to fewer harmful interactions between civilians and the police, as well as a reduction in racial disparities in policing. We hope that targeted communities would be most likely to trust and cooperate with law enforcement if they are not continuously subjected to emotional, physical, and financial and legal harms of excessive traffic stops. This reduction would also hopefully allow more officers to be allocated to issues that the communities actually care about, like regulating dangerous driving behavior, responding to emergencies, resolving criminal investigations, and getting to know the communities they serve. So by implementing this three-pronged policy, Chicago would make significant progress towards transforming the way that policing is done and achieving a more racially equitable traffic system.
All right. And thank you so much, Jay. So last but not least, because we are here, we want to, first off, encourage you all to come out and to join us in the Free2Move Coalition. Right now, I have a group chat started where we communicate back and forth. This is an active campaign with, with many organizations and stuff like this behind it. The ECPS Coalition, the Free2Move Coalition, and many other organizations in the community, and it's well supported by the community. So get in now, and this will be a great opportunity. In addition, share your story if you've been pulled over by the cops on a pretextual basis. Also, encourage your district councils to sign on to the End Pretextual Stops platform. Right now, it's in the consent decree, and the three players are the Law Office of Chicago, the Office of Attorney General, and the CCPSA. And so we really believe that we can end pretextual traffic stops because, as you can see, these are racially discriminatory stops right here. But if you need more information, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to me through my email, and you can also reach out to Impact for Equity here. So this brings a conclusion to our slides. Does anyone here happen to have any questions for us?
Yes. Hi, my name is Gail Hardy. I'm with the prison ministry at Trinity United Church of Christ. And I had a couple of questions. One of them was about the consent to search. Now, you're not obligated to give consent to search, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct for the most part.
Okay, so okay. And the other was some of the violations that you listed. Now, this might just be me talking, but that one headlight situation is dangerous. At least in my view, you know, not that they should go around stopping everybody with one headlight, but in that context, how much of this information, or how much of what you're doing is shared with the community at large, in terms of their part in toning down or having an impact on these stops? I imagine that this process you're going through is going to take some time to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
So what does the community need to do in the meantime?
Okay. Yeah.
Are they being educated about some of this stuff, or that's my question.
Okay. Okay.
Questions.
Well, yes. Thank you so much, Gail, for that. So I heard two questions in there, and I'll try to respond to those. I think the first question was around like taillights and the danger of this. So you know, those taillights, you know, whether it be like at night or whatever, when you're driving and you're pulling up behind someone, like you can't see when they're turning or whatever, that can definitely be a thing. But the sort of argument that we're making here, or the sort of policy that we're making here, is that this right here, what we're experiencing is a manipulation of that, right? A sort of like minor offense. Like, yes, like people should be told about this thing, but the problem is that this pretextual, in terms of the pretextual stops, this right here is used as a pretext to then pull over drivers, mostly of the Black and brown community. And what then happens from that is usually like, you know, some level of harassment, some of these arrests and stuff like that. And so the thing with it is like doing away with these pretextual stops would actually be a better way to actually deal with that. Like people could get, you know, whatever in terms of like these citations, and people could be pulled over, you know, for like, you know, maybe these broken headlights. But the whole thing about it is like that's used to then increase it to a bigger violation, which then ultimately leads to something like a Dexter Reed case where Dexter Reed was actually killed. And so that's the thing we're dealing with. Secondarily, yes, we are definitely in the community and we're engaging with the community. We and Belaya is here with me as well. But over the summer, we were on the west side, the south side. We were in the most impacted communities, but we also were in the communities that weren't as impacted. You know, with the Free2Move Coalition as well. And what this was we were telling the community about it, and the testimonies we got from people were overwhelming in terms of people being pulled over. And what this also revealed is that a lot of people, when they would get stopped or get pulled over in this instance, there was no sort of inquiry about like, hey, you had a broken tail light. Like, let me go help you out. Let me go drive you over here. A lot of times it was like, I'm gonna pull you over, and now this is an arrest. This is something else, or this escalates to something. So that's a part of the what we're doing. But we are engaging the community, and we're bringing the community out because we need community power to end this and to actually have a better practice that actually keeps the community safe. This doesn't. Yeah.
And I can actually jump in real quick and you know, for that second question as well. So we've dove into this as soon as we heard that there was going to be a petition made to the CCPSA. And so what we started was going canvassing in the 11th and 10th districts. Right after that, we hit 600 homes and 600 houses just with a small crew, and then we built upon that from there. We eventually went over to I don't know, it's in the 10th district. It's called the Village Fest, I believe. and we tabled there. So everybody that came across, we were trying to get them this information. And then we doubled that with the Riot Fest. So we've been continuously trying to get this information out. And just like this teach-in right now, we're trying to get people here to understand what's going on in the community and have a voice to be able to make changes, because we can see the disparities in the stops. We can see the disparities in, you know, what they say they find violence, but then they don't. So we can see that and want to have you here, among other things, to show we are learning and we have a voice and we're going to be heard. So we try to extend to everybody that we can get in touch with. And that's why it's such a blessing to have you all here, because like you said, you are the community that we want to have this information get to.
Absolutely.
Can I
Thank you
add
so much.
something? So are the police, is this a strategy that they use? I mean, is it understood, or is it just something that they use amongst themselves to create these traffic stops? You know, or is it a part of their policing strategy? Is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, this is just something that police pretty much do. There was a portion of it that pointed to the you know, stop and frisk, which is something that happened in New York. But this is a sort of
Mhm.
thing that the police use, and by their own sort of like testimony of it, it was supposed to make communities safer, but it didn't.
Mhm.
It didn't do
Mhm.
that. It actually went the other way,
Mhm.
and there's no proof of that. But yes, to your question, like this is something that the police engaged of their own, and in terms of our work here around police accountability, because this doesn't work, we think this should be done away with.
Okay, absolutely. Mhm.
Thank you so much, Gail.
Ryan, we
So
chat question in the chat if we have time for another question.
yes, we have time for maybe about 2 more questions, and then we're gonna transition to our call to action. So, so what is our response to if folks aren't pulled over for minor offenses such as not having license plate? How are those laws enforced, fines given? What is our response to if folks aren't pulled over for minor?
I can kind of jump in on personal experience on this. I live in the first district in Hyde Park, but I don't know about you folks, but I don't know if they're officers or if they're city workers that go around and check your plates when they're parked. They have been on it with, you know, issuing citations um, to, you know, residents who do not have proper registration or don't have the city sticker updated. They are on it. So I can at least speak from my district. That is how folks are receiving those citations.
Absolutely. And I also like this question because in some ways, this goes outside of the scope of just like what this campaign does, which is to just end those traffic violations. Because I think first of all, what we want to ground ourselves in is this, that in the first place, like, you know, these minor traffic stops were already a thing. But with the implementation or the carrying out of this strategy by the police to stop and pull people over on these pretextual stops, like it didn't work. You know what I'm saying? Like even in the event that you wanted to enact this to curtail that problem, it actually led to even more problems. So the response necessarily will be like, it just didn't work at all. And I think the response that Jay gave, which is that this is something that needs to be used. This, you know, maybe even, you know, checking on people for taillights and stuff like that. That should never be a context for someone to get arrested, for someone to get, you know, like killed or whatever like that. So, but I thank you so much for this question, Chime. All right. Do we have another question for anyone? From anyone?
I'm
Okay.
trying to, sorry, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. How, I know you said that other police districts have implemented this. How do you enforce stopping officers from not doing pretextual stops if on the books they write, okay, I pulled them over for XYZ, but in their own mind they have something else. You know, it's almost like, to my understanding, we're kind of telling them like, don't think that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love this question. I love this question. It's a little bit of outside of the scope of the impretextual stops, but also I want to say Belaya is also a part of Community Renewal Society as well. But this highlights our work around police accountability. So impretextual stops is one aspect, but there is a larger sort of like process that we're engaged in. In 2021, we were a part of the Empowering Communities for Public Safety ordinance that was passed. It was the most historic form of police accountability that has happened. And we're still in that process right now, fighting whatever. So in that way, what we are really talking about when we talk about this, we're talking about police accountability. And so that's another aspect. But in that way, that's what we would also, and this is for another thing, another presentation, but we'd also ask you all to support us in terms of our ECPS ordinance and the current fight for more community power over policing, because you're absolutely right. Like, we're not just out here trying to ask people to change minds. We are out here saying that we want to change policy. We want to change legislation. So I thank you so much for that, Jackson. I hope it answers your question.
I would like to say a little something on that. Ideally, like in a perfect world, we would want it to, no pretextual stops at all, because you know that the police may have that preconceived notion of why they're stopping you and just write something on the books anyway. That's still the problem. They could just put anything they want and be like, well, that's a good enough excuse. I was going to stop them for, blah, 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 but I got a chance to write something down, and then that's a good excuse. Ideally, we don't want that to happen. Don't stop me because of that reason. Like, if you have to stop me, maybe provide some aid or some services, help me out versus, arresting me or giving me a ticket for whatever they just decide to write down.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Belaya. So with this, we do want to just like bring this section to a close right now. If you have any more questions, we would love for you to
But sticking with Denzel though, but Rachel Smith is here with me because you had FaceTime with the entire Washington crew.
I sure did, Michelle, and loved every second of it.
So so send us questions to us. Also, go on the Free2Move Coalition's website, and we'll have many, many more of these as a part of the Free2Move Coalition, where we'll be able to like talk to these questions. Additionally, there will be I'll be sending out an email after this with another event that will be happening on December 6th around pretextual stops. But right now, what we really want to do, first of all, I want to give a hand to Jay, want to give a hand to Belaya, and want to give a hand to everyone that made it out. But this comes to the part of us where we call to action. So right now, the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability, the players in the consent decree, the Office of Attorney General, and also the Law Office of Chicago. All these players in there, we are continuing to engage, we're continuing to build pressure, and we're continuing to push this because we want it to be done. So what we are asking from people right now in this call is I'm putting this in the chat right here, and this is our call to action. So every month, the CCPSA, so the CCPSA is the Community Commission. Yeah, it is the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability. It was a board elected through the passage of the Empowering Communities for Public Safety ordinance, which again is one of the largest forms of police accountability that we've seen historically in America. So they were elected, and they are in charge of like this sort of they're the police oversight board. And so we right now are going out to the next CCPSA meeting, which will be next week. And I shall pull this up right here. we'll be going out to this. Let me share my screen. Yeah, we'll be going, oh, gotcha. So we'll be going out to this right here next week. It will be on October the 30th, right before Halloween. And what we're going to do is we really want our community to come here. We want to hear your voices. Like, we'll be there, but we really want to hear y'all. So if you can, please sign up for in-person comment. We'll be sending people a sort of framework of how we'll be sending you talking points and things like that that can be helpful. But if y'all could just maybe take like a minute or two right now to sign up for this, that would be really appreciative. So in the chat right now, can anyone put your hands up? Can you sign on to this right here to come out to the CCPSA meeting right here and have your voices heard around End Pretextual Traffic Stops? Okay. Gotcha. I think I see one person here. All right. Yeah, okay, Pastor Jonathan, thank you so much for that. Yeah, so yes. Hey, okay, word. So when you want to do this, we will email it out, but also like the email, what I just sent right here, please put this in the please sign up for this, and we will be in touch with you all through email. Please come out, everyone. This is a really great sort of campaign that we think we could win. We want to give a special shout out to Urban Village Church right now. Jay, thank you so much for coming through, and we thank so much for the Urban Village family, y'all. We hosted a vigil last month, but we're going to continue this going, and we're going to end pretextual stops right now. So we're going to close out right here. But for everyone that came out, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your night. And thank you so much for being here for this this presentation of our campaign. And there will be many more. There will be many more. Thank you.